Welcome on in, everybody. Happy Monday to you guys. We are here for another episode of DBacks Dispatch. Tonight's just going to be two of our normal three hosts. Gabe is a little bit busy. He's tied up. He's got some prior engagements that he's going to do. So, Gabe, enjoy your evening. But Brandon and I are here to talk a little bit about some of the international prospect and international signings that have recently, come and gone. I know the big name that was, kind of mentioned and talked about a lot in MLB was obviously Roki Sasaki. D-backs were not in on him, so they were able to use their allotment, their money, excuse me, on a few different guys that obviously we'll discuss here. But again, if this is your guys' first time ever stopping by D-backs Dispatch, want to welcome you in. We appreciate you guys, whether you're listening in the live show or if you happen to catch us after the live and you're listening on, Apple, Spotify, whatever it is. We appreciate it. We do appreciate any likes, comments, and subscribers because it really does help push us into the eyes of more people, more D-backs fans like yourself. Also, make sure you guys check out not only our Discord, which is a little teaser. One of the guests that we're going to have on tonight, he is in there as well. A lot of prospect information, a lot of stuff that was news and stuff that they were breaking before the actual news came out on social media from other D-backs Alex Weiner, even just D-backs guys in general. He was giving us some breaking news and all that before, so some kind of extra access and extra stuff that you get when you join the Discord, which is in our description. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky as well. Along with, make sure you guys go and head on over to azsnakepit.com. Check out all the articles over there. A lot of great content over there. I know, especially as we kind of get rolling into spring training, they're going to keep pumping out even more. We'll kind of get back into more of our, articles and all that as well. But again, AZ Snake Pit is the place to be. But like I said, we're here to talk about the international free agency signing. There was a little bit of a clip here. I know they signed more guys that wasn't just from the Dominican Republic, but because it was kind of news that we talked about a few months ago, the new facilities that they had down there. There was a kind of a cool little clip that I believe whether the D-back socials or whatnot, they put together that kind of highlighted it and had a few comments from current D-backs players like Justin Martinez, Geraldo Perdomo, and then even some, former D-backs players like Miguel Bautista and all that. So here's a cool little clip that we found that we wanted to play for you guys that, kind of talks a little bit about maybe why we're getting some more of these, higher value, higher dollar sign prospects, especially from, places like the Dominican Republic.
This was an absolutely incredible day. What a ceremony, and the dignitaries that showed up, including the president of the country. It shows you just how important this is, not only to our organization, but to this entire country. And we made it known today that we wanted to have the best world-class facility in all of baseball, and I think we do now. We have the best spring training facility back at home, and we have the greatest academy now in the Dominican. We thank the Dominican for always accepting us, embracing us, and now celebrating us as we make finer young men because of this great complex. It was very special for us to make sure that we built a legacy piece for Junior Noboa, who has done so much for our organization, for baseball in general, and for the Dominican Republic, his proud home. And for us to surprise him today with his name on this field, it will always be there, and we will always cherish the work and contributions of Junior Noboa. We are now unveiling Junior Noboa Field.
El marcador, por favor, si pueden verlo, el nombre de Junior Noboa.
Well, I can know express how happy and excited I am. The Diamondbacks cares about our players and want our players to be in the best facility.
Being able to come here and see what the Diamondbacks are doing for these guys, and we know that we are part of their history. That's what we look for, that 20 years from now can be at least 10 or 12 World Series champions from the Diamondbacks, and they can say the same to the new kids coming up.
Bueno, me siento me siento muy sorprendido de ver el trabajo que han hecho la organización Diamondback con este complejo. Recuerdo que en el otro complejo no teníamos tantas facilidades como ahora y de verdad me siento hasta un poquito celoso porque no tuve todas estas facilidades como la van a tener estos muchachos de ahora y siento que es algo que esos muchachos le van a sacar mucho provecho de su desarrollo.
like I said, kind of want a little bit of a teaser, kind of a way to ease us into. I like some of the comments, like Justin Martinez was saying, where he's a little bit jealous that
That made me laugh.
yeah, that he, especially because obviously the facial expression of him looked like he was kind of more like, yeah, like this, good for these guys, but man, I want this. Like this would have been really cool. But it was kind of a cool little behind the scenes access and a kind of little bit behind the scenes look at what they got going down in there in the Dominican and the new facilities and all that. So that was pretty cool. But like I said, we are here to talk more about not just the players that we might have signed from the during the international free agency period from just the Dominican Republic. There are plenty of other places we got them from. It's just maybe the one name that I would say a lot of DBacks fans probably heard of at least is definitely from the Dominican Republic and Elian De La Cruz. We talked about him a little bit in one of our past shows, but we'll get a little bit more of a deep dive and a kind of deeper analysis onto some of these guys as we bring on again our host or our co-host of the evening, our guest, our man Riley, aka Nugget. You guys might know him on socials and especially in the Discord. That's his @ but we want to bring on Riley to kind of let the people let you guys know who he is and all that. So welcome in, Riley. Had to use an excuse to use that clip.
I didn't know where else to use. I'm like, this is a good spot.
I love it.
Before we bring Riley on. So Josh, thanks for that great video.
Yeah, so Riley, kind of like I said, just let the people know who you are, how long you've been kind of doing the prospect diagnosis game, and like what made you want to kind of focus a little bit more on the deep dives and giving us some of the information that might not be as available from a lot of just media and people in general.
So hi, my name is Riley. I've been looking into the DBacks, specifically their farm system, for about the past 3 years now. I've been a fan my whole life, but I only really started diving into the team and really trying to figure out what was coming up for this team, especially during the very dark years, 2020 and 2021. I wanted to see what the team was doing, what it was becoming. And from there, I just sort of started getting more and more interested in the prospects. And eventually it grew from there. I was able to build some connections to people. And now I can just learn a lot about the system, understand what they've done, and see what they've really built themselves into nowadays.
That's awesome, honestly. I like obviously, like you said, you got some connections, and like I mentioned at kind of the intro, you were giving us some breaking news like hours, if not days, before we got the actual quote unquote official word from all that. So that was definitely something really cool. I'm glad that we have you in there. Obviously, thank you very much for joining our Discord, and obviously, thank you very much for being here tonight. I know there's we all got like jobs and we all got stuff doing that, so I know it's a little bit hard to, or sometimes can be hard to make time out of it. So thanks for coming on here to kind of give us a little bit more of a breakdown. There was a good amount of signings that we had because I believe I didn't fully count it, but as the graphic here, as you can see, there's a lot of names on there. Obviously, I mentioned earlier the one that everyone probably would have heard of at least, and the one obviously in the photo there, Elian De La Cruz, but a lot of names in general. I know there's a lot to kind of sort through, and we could be here for like an hour and a half, 2 hours actually talking about each and every single one of them. But instead of doing that, and before we even kind of talking to them, would you be able to kind of like break down exactly what like the international signing process is, kind of how like, like your information with the scout, like kind of how they like go about their process and analysis when it comes to, finding out some more information and whatnot with the international prospects that they sign?
So the international prospect system somewhat works similar to how high school prospecting does work, but it's a little bit different in a way that in a high school, you sort of have certain area scouts, specifically with scouting in areas like Dominican Republic and Venezuela. They come from specific academies and they will look from there and scout out certain players. These academies tend to also put together certain film reels, and they will also try and communicate about certain things about players to other scouts. Perhaps they say, oh, this player may not fit for us, but maybe this is something that another team would like. That's not entirely uncommon with what they do with scouting. For the most part, this will happen from the ages of 13 to 14 when they truly start scouting. The vast majority of players under the international pool will probably sign under 16 to 17, at least if we're considering Central and South America. Yeah, that as well.
Are they actually that
But,
age?
but like it's a little bit different as well, though, if you consider other areas. I know Taiwan, Japan, Korea also operate under a little bit different, but pretty much all come from academies, which for the most part just act as high schools for most of the players.
Okay, honestly, I didn't. It was kind of interesting hearing some of that. I didn't really know exactly how the process works. I mean, it makes sense that they're trying to snag them at, or well, that was a wild sentence. I was gonna go back on, not snag them, but kind of look at them, and see exactly what they are from obviously a younger age. Kind of scout them a little early on. And it's crazy that, like, I know obviously here in the States, a lot of guys, like, even being drafted out of high school, it's not like uncommon for, like you said, kind of similar to how like high school stuff like that works here. But it seems like, I mean, that'd be what, the age of almost like middle schoolers, where it's kind of crazy that the talent that they just have abroad. Guys,
That
Just random swing appears.
yeah, right. Oh, hey, that's a pretty nice swing though. Say it. But there was some information in there that I'm glad that I know now, because it's not a process I'm too familiar with. And then I don't know about Brandon, if there's anything that kind of stood out to you about just like how this whole thing, because I know there's some tweaks and stuff that they're making every now and then. I know there's been talk about doing like an international draft, which I know a lot of people are opposed to, and I can understand why. But
yeah, I mean, again, this whole process, I was very like, had no idea how, like, I thought it was like they just like had scouts that just traveled these countries looking for these kids. Like, just didn't realize it was more of a lot of these teams now are creating these massive facilities, these big time academies, basically to bring these players here, develop them down there, and then once they're ready, bring them up to whatever minor league affiliate to continue to develop. It was interesting to see how it's very similar to how it kind of works with high schoolers.
yes, especially the part about, like, Riley was saying, with them maybe knowing that, oh, this isn't something that's going to fit their team, but something that could fit like a different team. It's kind of interesting hearing about how they kind of like look at it from a different thing, where they're not just thinking about the Diamondbacks organization and how they'll fit into there. They factor in some other organizations and some other aspects that other organizations might be looking for when it comes to some of these players and all that. And as one of the comments, Jeff's bringing up here in the comments saying, hey guys, for me, I wish there was just one draft, stateside and international. I feel like that would be a lot more fair than whatever happened with Sasaki. And yes, it is understandable. I could see, the want and the need for an international draft like that. But I know that there's a few, at least I don't have it in front of me, but I remember hearing over the last few years and all that, how some of that can kind of be a little bit of a slippery slope and can lead to a little bit more, collusion, or a little bit more like shady stuff going on. So maybe we'll see something like that in the next 5 years, but I'm curious your thoughts on that, Riley, on, like, do you think there's ever going to be a chance or a possibility where we see an international draft, or is it going to kind of stay the same course that we're seeing currently?
I think that there's a chance of one. MLB has shown that they're not afraid to change things around. Obviously, we saw the draft sizes and a number of other things vastly change over the past few years. We saw what was once 40 rounds and higher now go down to only about 20 rounds. The spending pools, a number of other things have changed a lot in the past few years, including comp picks as well. The problem with the international draft would also be something similar to like an NBA draft, where you end up having these academies being set up to where they don't actually care for the players and rather purely develop just for the draft, which can create its own problems and can create its own issues within a league. So if it's coming, it's not coming anytime soon, but I do think it's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely some kinks and stuff that need to be ironed out. But I think it would be one of those where it could be good for the baseball in the sport in a whole. But like you said, it could make some of those facilities not be as like player oriented, and actually like making them feel like, hey, we're not here just because there's a chance we can turn you into some crazy prospect. Like, we care even like Derek Hall mentioned in that opening video, kind of like, helping them grow, like, as humans, as men, and like individuals. Like they're looking at it more of a, hey, we want you for the human you are, not just for, the talent and the ability that you possess as a player. But kind of going into, like I said, there's like 21 prospects, I believe, that they signed on here. And as I mentioned, there's a chance where we could go on here for hours. And if you guys obviously have any questions, put them on in the chat. If we can't get to them in here, again, join the Discord. Nugget is in our Discord, or sorry, Riley is in our Discord named Nugget. If there's anything like any prospect in particular that you want like a little bit more of information on, he's your man. So again, make sure you guys join the Discord in there. But the thing I kind of wanted to ask you is, I know we talked about it like pre-show, and with the like 21 names in here, I would imagine there's at least around like 5 that you had a little bit of an intrigue on, like a little bit of an eye. I don't remember the exact name, but there was one that you did mention that got some like Corey Seager comps. So my question is going to be, what are some like, maybe 5 guys that stood out to you? And then with those 5 guys, what are some parts of their game that really, kind of like have you raise an eyebrow as like, oh, wow, like there's some real potential here. And then what are some parts of their game that might be some bigger question marks when it goes into like their development?
So I guess I'll start off with the first guy, and it was the Corey Seager comp. I think his name is Elian Bruno. I believe he's from the Dominican Republic, and he's 6'4". This dude is massive. He was putting up some serious run times, as we can see here. This would be on the higher end of MLB run times, I believe. From what I could gather, the power grades were insanely high. It was partially what got him grades similar to Seager, and the other comp was also Elian De La Cruz. One thing I would note is that, according to one scout, he had a batted ball north of 110 miles per hour, which is extremely interesting considering his age of only, I believe it was 16 at the time that I spoke to him. The signing bonus was only about $950,000, so this is actually on the smaller end. He does also possess some decent run, or not necessarily run tool, but also decent defensive abilities. He is currently a shortstop, but he looks to profile more to a third base or second base type just because of his frame. But it would not be hard for a 6'4" guy to stick at shortstop either.
Yeah, so just looking at some of these clips, because this is the first time I'm seeing it, he is a huge dude, kind of like what Cam is bringing up in our YouTube comments. Like, yeah, he is a big man over there. I mean, not even a man. He's still, a little bit younger, but he looks pretty fluid. I do like the swing. I can see a little bit like where you're saying
that swing right there looks like Corey Seager, Game 1 of the 2023 World Series that we all have vivid PTSD from.
Yes, then that's also why when I first heard the comparison to Corey Seager, I was also kind of like, oh. Because I also thought at the same time, like, oh no. Do we really answer to being destroyed by Corey Seager by getting Corey Seager?
I mean, hey, if he could turn into the same player that Corey Seager was, which that is just going to be a name that's going to turn into Voldemort on this show at some point, where we just mention the shortstop number 5 from Texas, because that name alone will probably bring back flashbacks.
You know who is also 6'4" like Sosa is here?
Who?
Corey Seager. Corey Seager.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, like this has me like. Yeah, the stereotypical shortstop, like 6'4", it's not normal. Like, normally guys at that height, you really want, like, first base or in the outfield because they're not as quick as most shortstops are, who 6'6", 6'1". But we've seen a lot of guys recently, like Ellie. It don't matter. Like, some of these guys are just freakish athletes and just they somehow are able to be so agile, so quick. And from seeing these clips here, Sosa, wow. Like, he is very quick. He does not move like a 6'4" human being.
He looks really smooth out there.
That's partially, I think, what made the D-backs much more interested in him. They do go for power guys, but they like to see some agility with that as well. They don't tend to just look for a straight power bat when they look at guys for the most part. The last name I could think of where they just went purely based on their power metrics was Ivan Melendez. And even then, that's a stretch because he still had a decent glove.
Man, that the Hispanic Titanic hype that was after he was drafted was there. So hopefully he can. Just because you brought up Ivan, hopefully he can
That
be a guy
freaking
that turns
chase
it around.
rate. Just bring down that chase rate, and we'll be good. Because dear God, it's so bad.
So obviously, I know you brought up him, but what were some other, maybe like even if you like, again, we got time tonight. If there's a few other, obviously outside of Bruno that you kind of liked, who are some of the other guys that stood out to you, and what you like about them?
I think I'll go next one for the top player of the class and probably the most notable, Elian De La Cruz, also from the Dominican Republic. Elian had a hyper-specific comp. It was a more athletic Marcell Ozuna. And if you look at his swing, the way that he has his toe pointed in, the way that he swings from the hip and sort of drives through was very reminiscent of Marcell Ozuna. His glove and arm are more on the fringy end, but it looks like he should be fine for left field or right field. The bat upside in terms of power was enough that it surprised some scouts. He ended up being on the top 35 of Franchi Romero's list. He was on the top 35 also of the Fangraphs list. He also has solid contact rates as well. This is not a guy that is selling out his power or selling out his contact for his power. So you will be seeing a full arsenal in terms of the bat with some glove upside.
Honestly, I kind of like the sound of that. I know we even mentioned before, as long as he just isn't off the field Ozuna, and we don't have our own Elian from the DBacks kind of jokes out here. But yeah, so just looking at the swing, it does look like he obviously, I know BP and some of these are tough because it's not like a super big sample size and all that, but it does look like he has some pretty decent pop. Obviously pull, I imagine he can go the opposite way pretty well. But he's 17, so he's still, for being 17, he looks like he has some decent potential to grow into, like you said, an Ozuna type hitter at the plate.
One thing that I will note is that scouts were really surprised by his pull side power. When he pulled the ball, it was supposedly loud and extremely loud compared to some of the other names that they were scouting out and other D-backs prospects that they looked at. It was I guess that's more worth noting, but he's also able to drive the ball to the opposite field for power, which is also a good tool to have, especially at a park like Chase Field.
Yeah. I know we saw Walker do it for a while there. Like I know they're not the same exact guy, but if you can go opposite field to Chase Field, it is, it's always nice not to be like a one tool kind of hitter where, you're only pulling your only power is like to your pull side. But
yeah, it also makes it more difficult to pitch to you because they're like, oh, you never go the opposite field, pitch it like we'll pitch you outside and you're going to roll over it like all the time. So, yeah, if he can get that more balanced approach, again, he's only 17, but you never know. Some of these guys, once they like start playing like organized, like professional baseball, a lot of these guys can develop very, very quickly. So yeah, like he's definitely he is the crown jewel of this particular class. So I'm very excited to see how he does develop over the next couple of seasons.
So one other note, I guess, on this class, and it would be worth noting for the entire class, also to other fans, is that they didn't necessarily spend much on one player. I know that the Mets spent on a guy by the name of Elian Pena. They spent $5 million of their pool on one guy. There was other teams. I know the Braves spent $2.5 million of their only about like $5 million pool on one pitcher. And I guess as we're on the topic of the difference in pool money, they made one other move to their 2024 pool. It was from Taiwan. He was relatively unscouted. He did play in the Premier 12, which, if you don't know, is a smaller version of the World Baseball Classic. It's much more like the minor league level of the World Baseball Classic. His name, by the way, is Chung Seong Huang. He's from Taiwan. He, last that I checked, was clocked in at 6'0", 175 pounds. When he was originally scouted, though, he was only 5'8", 150 pounds. What would be most notable about him is that he throws a fastball at the time clocked in at 96.4 miles per hour. Also of note is a curveball, a slider, a changeup, and a split change. Actually, not change. Sorry, not change, but a splitter and then split change. Split change could also be kind of called a chitter. I believe Jeremiah Estrada of the Padres throws one. It's a very weird pitch, but he's a very interesting profile. The control is there as well. This isn't just a project arm who's throwing everywhere but cannot hit any target. He's relatively well developed. He's currently 19. I expect him to start out in the complex league, and he could move up the system relatively fast for his age and for the stuff he's already presented.
Yeah, so looking at the clips here, I do kind of see what you're talking about with like the control. Obviously, you know, guys at like a young age in general, and some of these, just like even a guy that's in the majors and is, I guess, not fully established, but a guy that's in the majors is a lot of hype. Even Justin Martinez is wild at times. That swing right there, that was disgusting. I don't know if that was a split change you were referring to, but it looks like he's making some of these hitters look foolish. And if he could, you know, obviously I know you said he grew a few inches when he was first scouted, and if he could add a few more ticks on his fastball and he can, you know, kind of see that control and all that still develop and stay there as he winds up. I mean, do you think that there's a good chance that he could be a guy that we see maybe, I know you said starting in like the prospect league or the complex league, but do you think there's a chance that maybe he gets up to whether it's high A or even possibly double A? Do you think that's something that we could see in the next year or so?
Just knowing how the org tends to work with pitchers, I would expect him to mostly stay in Visalia if he does make it out of complex league soon enough. They don't like pushing guys up, and I do know that there is a lot of empty space as of now in high A. It would have to be proving himself a lot in low A, though. It would have to be somewhat similar to what
Geisting? I think Geisting had a pretty solid time in low A before he got moved up.
Looks like we lost him there for a second.
Well, we can kind of fill in a little bit. Say, Brandon, what were some of the? I know. Did he back?
Yeah,
He's there. We go. Perfect.
Okay, there you go. Mic cut out there, but he more than likely, if he does move up, would stay in low A, and then from there, the projection would sort of depend on how well he does in low A. It's a bit weird though, because some guys have jumped almost entirely from low A to high A to double A. I think it was Kyle Ament who was in AAA. He's a reliever, but in the span of 20 innings, he jumped up 2 separate leagues. I know that the team just jumped. I know the team jumped a starter who you might hear about later on by the name of Jose Cabrera. He jumped from Hillsborough to Reno, and he was moved earlier this offseason. So it's not that it couldn't happen. I just don't know if they're going to push his development that much. I guess also as another note, he was scouted out of the U18 Taiwan team from the World Leagues. One thing of note, though, is that was the exact same team that the Diamondbacks scouted Yumin Lin out of. It seems like they have a certain target that they go for whenever they go out of Taiwan now.
Yeah.
Hey, I know Lin's pretty
it's worked
solid.
out. Yeah, it worked out pretty good so far with Lin. Like, Lin for me is going to be someone to watch in spring training for sure. Like, I'm really thankfully he's okay, because that ball that he took to the face last year was very scary.
I believe it was 112 miles an hour. Dude. So he was, and the thing is, like, he somehow did not get like any serious structural damage out of that. So that was big for him. I do expect that we will see Lin at some point in the coming year, probably at MLB level. He's risen up that fast, and really he's 1 or 2 velo clicks away from really sitting in on the MLB roster, or at least being just outside and maybe taken into a bullpen role.
Yeah, so that's always been seemingly one of the things. Yeah, another lefty. I know Gabe always mentions that, where it's always nice to have like the lefty in there, because sometimes a team can be a little too right-handed heavy, but I think the velo thing is a great point, that obviously he has the control, he has some of the movement, but if he can just get an extra tick or two on there, it could make his off-speed stuff look even better. So
I think I guess it's also worth noting, Lin could spin the ball like almost nobody else. His curveball during the Arizona Fall League was clocked at 3450 on the RPMs. What that if you do not know what that is higher than, if you do not know how like MLB RPM rates work, that is incredibly high. That is not
like
just high, that would be top of the
stuff.
league.
Yeah,
there's only one other pitcher that there's only one other pitcher I think out there right now who's put up an RPM similar to that, and it's between Seth Lugo and Lucas Sims.
Dude,
that is
Seth
it.
Lugo is a spinny curveball man. So if we can have our own spinny curveball man, I'm okay with that.
So if you can have his stuff operate slightly higher in velocity and have it slightly more teasable towards MLB batters, I think he will have a bit of staying power.
Definitely.
Honestly, I like that. So what was some of the other? I know like what we touched on like about 3 so far. What are some other names and stuff that stuck out to you?
I'm just trying to think through here. Which would be a good one? I think my next one, I'll go with a name by the name of Felix Genao. He's one of the more interesting names on this list. One thing I will note is that he had some extreme upside. A lot of scouts were actually really shocked that he was even selected at such a slow value. He was only signed for about $400,000. Some guys were expecting him to go into the $800,000 range or higher. If you've watched his swing, it's one of the smoother swings in baseball. He's got the Carlos Gonzalez or obviously the Griffey style that we all know and love. He does on some swings drop the bat in the exact same way, but he's shown great pull side power with solid tools and also some really interesting metrics in terms of his contact rates and also his run rates as well.
So you kind of mentioned it, but the swing does look really smooth. Like that looks like a short, kind of shortcut that puts some, good barrel on the ball.
He's got one of the nicer swings, and it's probably one of the more prepared arms in terms of, or one of the more prepared swings in terms of what we have out of this class. There's another name here that was really underrated. This was only at a $200,000 value. It's Daonil Montero, who was also out of the Dominican Republic. One of the most notable things about Daonil was he was on a DBacks scout team for the past 2 years. Some scouts believe that he has a 30 doubles, 20 home run, 20 stolen base upside at shortstop. He showed some impressive tools. He had a solid arm and solid glove. His bat to ball skills were very impressive. He was really impressive in terms of his pull side power and really being able to tap into that despite being at a smaller frame. Another note on him is that he also has a line drive ability to all fields. He's been really a high riser in terms of how certain scouts have viewed him over the past few years. At one point, he was sort of we just brought this guy in, one of the $10,000 or less kinds of signings, which is just in terms of minor league baseball and specifically like Dominican Summer League, is basically roster filler to jumping up to this $200,000 value.
Oh my God. That sounds pretty crazy. The fact that Brandon, I don't think you muted your mic, by the way, sir. He must have just kicked the table. That's funny. But yeah, say that the fact that they got him for that cheap. Obviously, I know, like you said, and it's been on the scout team for a few years. Maybe wasn't as like highly looked at by some of these teams, but hey, it shows that the D-backs are, obviously I know they've always had a really solid scouting department. It's just obviously sometimes maybe the development doesn't fully, match up with what they scouted with. But he is, especially being a righty, I know like it seems like him, like we've bounced around from a few like righties and lefties. I know you mentioned even before. Did you say that he has a pretty solid arm too?
Yeah, his arm's on the better end. I would say it's about like a 55 grade. I wouldn't say it's much higher than that, but it's a good tool to have as a shortstop.
So that is always something. I know it's more of the outfield arm strength that we kind of lack a little bit, but hey, anytime we can get some guys that have some good arm strength, it's always a benefit, especially because you said he's a shortstop, correct?
Yes, I believe he's currently profiling as a shortstop.
And I know obviously not every shortstop, but it does, we've seen over in history, even sometimes like shortstops, like I believe Mookie Betts was scouted as a shortstop and brought up there, maybe even as a second base, but usually they're some of the more athletic guys in the field. So hey, who knows if the shortstop role is filled in the years to come from Jordan Lawler, maybe they can try to slot him over to third, which that would even be better because you still need a solid arm at third. But definitely a name I'm going to keep a kind of an eye out on.
I guess for the next two, and I'm going to combine these two names because they have very similar styles. I'm going to go with Juan, Brima, and Diego Ortiz. These are two players, both out of the Dominican Republic, and both are switch hitters with extremely good bat-to-ball skills and have some great pull skills as well from both sides of the plate. Let me just double check. Both of them also have what would be considered 60 or 70 grade defensive skills too. These guys are, and I think at least one person I was talking to described it as if Geraldo Perdomo was on steroids. Especially Diego Ortiz. Diego Ortiz showed some serious arm upside and was showing off a 70 grade arm at one point, according to one scout. So this was a guy who showed serious bat to ball skills from both sides, some power that he could tap into, and a constant adjustments in his swing for both sides of the plate. I believe for both of them, they're better on their pull side from the left. The right side is more of a line drive, but both are still making decent to hard contact.
Yeah, so just in the few clips, because this is the first one for you guys that are watching and seeing some of the clips. This one is Juan Brima. Not too much on him, but I kind of like the swing. Obviously, it looks like he's got some pretty decent power to him. But yeah, the Diego Ortiz one, I can definitely see the Perdomo kind of comps. I know Perdomo's kind of like, he's not like a short dude, but he's definitely a little bit like, kind of like lankier kind of guy. And even in some of these clips, like seeing him like right here in some of these, it does look like the ball kind of just like rockets out of his hand. And I know some of these prospect videos and all that, it's kind of training, it's kind of drills and all that. So you got to take a little bit with a grain of salt, but it does seem like, kind of like to your point, he's got a cannon attached to his right shoulder there.
And I think that this is very nice for some of the fans because I do know, and I've heard it constantly whenever we talk about the DBacks, especially our outfielders and some of the infielders that we've had, we tend to have some noodle arms. So it's certainly nice to have.
Yeah, it seems like off the top of my head, the guys over the last few years that have had solid arms, like obviously Nick Ahmed at short, he was really solid. Perdomo has maybe not as like, prime Nick Ahmed, where Nick seemed to have like a cannon where he would make some of those like crazy deep throws and gun some guys out. But yeah, so there's not too many, really strong arms that I can think of, especially off the top of my head, whether infield or outfield, that the D-backs normally have, because it's just not, I mean, again, hey, sometimes you don't need a strong arm, but sometimes it is nice to see guys that actually, outside of pitchers that can, really, huck that thing over.
So the last two names, and I'm going to kind of combine them again. These will be the last two names I feel like are the most notable. It would be Mayki de la Rosa. And then on the other hand, let me just double check the name. I just got to double check here because sometimes I don't want to get them completely wrong.
No, I get that.
It's Mayki de la Rosa from the Dominican Republic and Ronny Suarez from Venezuela. Mayki de la Rosa was a guy that got profiled specifically to a very specific Diamondbacks player. The name was Jake McCarthy, and it was Jake McCarthy with a cannon. He has a heavily contact-focused approach. He has the plus speed, but he has the arm as well. He works with a very tight operation. He was a seriously impressive bat from what I've heard from a few scouts. He showed room for some home run upside. They said maybe about 10 home runs or more, but they do feel like he's more of this contact-oriented guy who could be an absolute monster in the field. Then kind of going on to Ronny Suarez, he was an even more interesting name because he was put at a 60 grade on the power and a 65 on the speed. They believe that he's going to stay in center field long term. He also has an absolute cannon. There are a few whiff concerns. The name that I think, the one thing that they're very interested in is the fact that he has a very similar profile to what Christian Robinson was around 2019. In terms of a 6'4" player from the international class who was absolutely rocketing the ball to all fields with defensive upside and power upside. It's truly something that I think they don't mean as a harshness or anything like that. because at that point, Christian Robinson was a top 100 prospect. So that's sort of the profile that they've looked for. A lot of these guys are more high upside, but I will say that a lot of these guys also have relatively high floors in terms of what they could do.
So that is honestly everything that you're saying here has me excited, and definitely one of those where I know in the last few years I've been kind of trying to get back into, maybe not get back into, but kind of like look a little bit more than just what we got on the AAA level. So I'm gonna definitely have to kind of keep some tabs on these guys as we see their careers progress. Yes, Brandon highlighted this comment from Cam here that you touched on. It's definitely needs some cannons in the outfield, and I know Robinson had some of his development kind of delayed. We got the speed.
Just can't throw guys out for nothing.
Yeah, so we get ran on like crazy out there.
I believe that of these guys, the only one I've heard that didn't have any serious arm was Elian De La Cruz, but it's not an arm to the point where you would be like, oh no. You wouldn't be like, if the ball gets to him and there's a guy on second or third and he's about to go, you would not be super concerned as to, oh no, he's just going to get right to it. You can expect that it's going to be a fight at the plate or a fight at third.
Not a Gerardo Parra out there, but he's not a Chris Owings out there either.
Yeah, he's not a Nick Ahmed either.
Owen.
Sorry, I had to bring up the center fielder legend Chris Owings. Man, what a dark time the D-back center field was for a minute there. Because my goodness,
Andrew, I believe you are correct. Gurriel currently has the best outfield arm that we have,
but it's not spectacular. Which
it's
hey, you know what? This is no offense to the current outfielders. He's the nicest turd of an arm we have.
I will say though, like it's specifically for Chase Field, it's kind of good to have range guys because it's not a park where I assume compared to like a Petco Park, I'm just thinking a division like a Petco Park or even like a Dodger Stadium where you don't need as much range and you can work that arm. At Chase Field, you need to get to the ball. I mean, to the gap, it's what?
414, I think.
Yeah, it's like 410 or
a line drive to that right field corner is a triple for almost any average speed guys. So
which is why also, and you need a guy that can get over there and really cover that ground, which is why I think that they've prioritized this. I think that in the recent draft, they've also gone with this, obviously with a Slade Caldwell. I think that's the name we've heard. And the other name I'm thinking of is Drew Jones, who I guess if you want to talk about arms is probably the best arm the D-backs have, MLB or minor league.
Yeah. I got to take a trip out to either Visalia or maybe even Hillsborough if he makes it up to there. I want to see Drew in person because that's one of the things I've definitely heard of. Obviously, even coming out of the draft is, his arm and all that, and defense.
He has his dad's arm.
Yeah,
like he literally has his dad. Like that was his dad's best skill, in my opinion.
And defense. That was really solid out there for like in the field too.
But his ability to just throw out guys was just, you're like, why are you running on this man? He's going to throw you out. Just stop.
I believe it was his, it was in the spring breakout during the prospect game that he had a throw clocked in at something like 94.6 miles per hour, which, if you do not know, would have put you, I think only Gurriel had one other throw that was faster than that at MLB level. So he would be one of the top arms at MLB based off of or one of the top arms on our team based off of just one singular throw.
That's crazy. So you kind of actually, teed it up honestly perfectly. I know it's, maybe we could have like saved it for the end, but I know it was kind of some news that we mentioned in the thing. I believe the D-backs are facing the Royals, kind of switching gears from just international prospects and guys that are now in our system to some guys that we've had in the system before. Before we kind of get into some of the names that you kind of have, like, that have intrigued you and some guys that you maybe want fans to kind of like pay a little bit more attention to and kind of watch out as the season and even seasons in the future progress, who are some names do you think are really going to show out when it comes to the D-backs? I think it's the D-backs and Royals and their spring, is it the spring breakout, correct?
Yep.
I believe it's the spring breakout.
March 14th.
Yeah, March 14th is going to be a cool thing. Who are some of the names on there? Like, obviously, we might see guys like, hopefully Drew Jones and even Jordan Lawler. But who are some names do you think that the D-backs will have kind of playing out there? And then somebody that, could rise a little bit in the prospect rankings just because of them having a solid, maybe not prospect rankings, but maybe bring a little more attention from D-backs fans and get a few more eyes on them when it comes to playing in that breakout game?
I think that there's a few names that we could watch just as fans. The number one name I'd suggest having an eye on would be Slade Caldwell. He has some serious power in his bat. It's one of the shortest swings I have ever seen, and I do not know where that power comes from, but I have seen him drill a ball extremely hard, had to be over 108, 109, directly to center off the wall. It just possesses really interesting power metrics at a very young age and on a very small build. Obviously, the first person you're going to think of is Corbin Carroll.
He literally is a copy of Corbin Carroll.
and because of that, you will see a lot of Corbin Carroll in him, including the arm, but that's another story. The other name I'm thinking of, and it's going to be not necessarily, I think one starter and one reliever. I think you probably are going to start hearing the name, maybe not Jose Cabrera, but I'm trying to just think through if I wanted to mention him because I don't know if his velo's there yet, but I'm going to go with Connor Foley. From this most recent draft, he clocked in a fastball at 18 inches up, a vertical break at 97 miles per hour.
What?
18 inches of vertical. If you do not know about baseball, an 18 inches of vertical break at 97 miles per hour is what Ryan Nelson looks like on a good day.
Dude.
So
he's 21. Dude, he's a mammoth of a human being. He's 6'5", 235. He's 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then I think my next name, if you wanted to see velocity, this guy's going to probably drill a dude in the head and then throw him to the backstop. But he's also, I think, the guy with the largest fastball in the system. And I guess also parlay it into another guy. His name is Sam Knowlton. I think it was number 13 in our 2023 draft. He's like 6'7", 250 pounds, and he throws 102. He can't control it for anything, but he does throw it.
So Justin Martinez, when he first came up.
So no, this guy makes Justin Martinez from that season look like Greg Maddux.
Is it Rick Vaughn without the glasses where he's genuinely taking out heads in the batting practice?
Yes, just a bit outside.
Just a bit outside.
RIP, a legend, by the way.
Another thing I guess I'll note, and this is another reliever that actually showed some interesting metrics, is Yordan Chalice. I want you to imagine for a second, like the slot that Ryan Thompson throws out of. Like think about that slot, move it up like very slightly, and now imagine him throwing 98.
Jesus Christ.
That is Yordan Chalice. He also does that with, I believe it's a slider, and he's shown some really impressive metrics. The control is pretty good there. I don't think it's like stunning, but he will be a serious arm to watch in the future. I could see him in Reno this season because he is just electric. This is honestly, I guess the best way to describe it to a current D-backs fan would be like if AJ Puck was from the right side.
Dude, that gets me hyped. I would be very okay with that, honestly.
Yeah, like there's a lot of prospects that we have, like really, really good ones that we could be seeing here very, very soon. Like, I can't wait to watch Landon Sims. Like, Landon Sims to me is the one that probably one of the more, but I like he's notable, but he's not like one we're probably going to see for a while.
I will say that Sims, from what I've read, is going to be starting in Double-A this season, but I also will say that some of the metrics he showed, despite his fastball not being there, it is, I don't mean this in a bad way, Seawald-esque, because it flies up through the zone and it's completely out of sorts. Supposedly the spin on it looks more like a changeup. And because of that, and having decent vertical break metrics, it is almost impossible to hit for most guys. And you parlay that with a slider that can just basically rip you apart, and a changeup that can basically keep you off of the plate, you're going to have a guy that could be a future MLB closer.
Yeah.
So I know he throws at least a little bit harder than Sewell, doesn't he? Doesn't he touch in like the high 90s?
Yeah. So he was originally in the high 90s, and this is his first year back from surgery. He was operating more around 93, 94 this season, but he was up to like 96, 97. I expect it to be a bit higher this coming season, so it would be a bit better. But he's definitely a guy who has, I wouldn't say a unicorn fastball, but it's pretty close to one.
I'm honestly kind of on Brandon's side. Definitely going to be a guy, which, again, I know they talked to, I think Jack Summers responded to somebody on Twitter that was asking him a question about the DBacks TV deal. There is no, I believe, set price yet, but I think it's going to be kind of the same as last year, where it's going to be through MLB TV. And I believe not every game is broadcasted, but there is, I think if you scroll down on the app, you do have the chance to watch a bunch of minor league games. I know I do that sometimes whenever we're playing on playing in like California, and we have those 7-10 starts against the Dodgers or the super late ones where, I'll catch maybe a Sod Poodles or a Rawhide, kind of like one of those games, check them on there. So if you guys are looking into possibility of watching some more of these, young arms, it's definitely a way to do it, because they do have a lot of the games, especially even Reno games, broadcasted on there. But kind of going from some prospects that, you have your eye on, some guys that have intrigued you. We talked about a little bit pre-show, and I know I'm going to use untouchable in air quotes because, again, borderline no player in baseball, especially prospects who aren't fully proven MLB guys, are untouchable, and we're like they require king's ransom. But who are some guys, obviously, that if a team would want to trade for them, they would be, as you mentioned earlier, a Dalton Varsho-esque package where you'd have to get major league ready talent, like in exchange for some of these guys?
So there's three names that I have constantly heard would not be touched in a trade. Number one is our number one prospect, Jordan Lawler. The value they see on him, obviously, is a guy who has 70 grade speed, extremely good defense at shortstop with bad upside and some power upside as well. We're talking about a guy who could very easily be maybe not necessarily like an Ellie, but in terms of numbers, pretty close to that. And if we see the metrics that he had this year and how he did this year, I don't think it's too far off to say he could probably replicate those numbers, give or take. And I do think that the team values him like that. The next name is Drew Jones. The thing with Drew is he's got such upside that a swing tweak will basically turn him from what is a Jake McCarthy to a potential MVP candidate. And I guess last but not least, I believe Slade Caldwell is pretty much untouchable. They're going to want to hold on to him. He's too young at this stage and not developed enough to really see what kind of clay they're molding into with him. They know what they're getting, but at the same time, players change all the time, and they do still feel like he's a part of their future, and they are not willing to give him up.
For those of you that don't know, those are our top three prospects, by the way. So
that's crazy that Slade's already up there. I know the D-backs have had some tough luck, obviously injury-wise. I know Drew's slipped in some people's mind, so understandable. But
it's so weird. At this time last year, everyone was calling Drew Jones a bust already.
It's just because they want to compare him to Jackson Holiday, and if a guy drafted before you, it makes he's just not a unicorn like Ohtani unicorn, but he's a one-off. He's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. I will say when
the freaking year that Drew had last year, all of a sudden, August, September, oh, look at what Drew Jones is doing. Like, didn't you call him a bust like 6 months ago?
Drew's number one thing is, and I guess I'll just ask the people at home to try and do this. I want you to try and pick up something that's shaped like a baseball bat, and I want you to get almost halfway down into the splits. You're going to feel like a baby giraffe first walking. I want you to try and swing back without bending your front leg and swing entirely through your hands. That is what Drew Jones was doing, and he managed an 800 OPS doing that. So just to kind of show you what kind of player he is and how much raw talent he has, he was swinging basically only with his wrists, and he was still able to put up an 800 OPS.
That's kind of insane, because even looking back some of the clips, I know it's the really popular one when he was in high school, and it was the people were yelling overrated. And he, ended up taking that pitcher deep. Even in that video, you can kind of definitely see where it looks like he's not having much lower body movement. It's kind of like more of like an upper body swing, and like generating the kind of power he's doing his upper body. If he can get, both top and bottom half to kind of like work on the same page, I think we'll, kind of like what you're saying, I think we'll see a big improvement. And I mean, not like 800 OPS is terrible at all. Like that's a really good OPS.
It's amazing.
But
That's
and it's also in
his
it's also in
age.
low A though. It's also in low A though. So, but to show that he could have that kind of tools and that kind of potential just by getting himself a functioning swing is certainly something that I think a lot of fans feel like. I think it's very similar to what a lot of fans feel about Alek Thomas. And it's in the exact same way that we're all like, okay, he's just one swing tweak away. He's just one little thing away. And we see these like flashes in the pan where it's just like, there it is. That's right there. That's our top prospect. That's the guy we want.
Like that home run against the Cubs earlier this year. Was it Justin Steele he took deep, I think?
I think so.
God, that was so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I know obviously like we're getting closer to an hour here, so we won't go on like some of our other shows. We go like an hour and a half, but there's a few other things I wanted to get to, and also if you're comfortable with it, there's a few questions and a few stuff in the chat from our viewers that we'll kind of end on. But I know you sent the link or sent the confirmation in the prospect channel earlier, talking about how the D-backs were fully locked in and confirmed to have the number 18 and number 29 picks. I know we talked a little bit about a pre-show. Who do you see the D-backs, at least whether scouting, if they do fall to them, or who do you think that they're going to kind of eye and fits their, draft process and kind of the organizational needs when it comes to that 18th pick, or even if you have another name that kind of pops into your head for their 29th pick?
So one name, and we talked about this pre-show, and I know I got a few laughs. One pick, and it's something they've done with their first round pick each of the past, or 3 of the past 4 years, is getting a very specific type of player, specifically a fast outfielder who's on the smaller end. Unfortunately for the Diamondbacks, one of those is extremely close and actually was joking around with us on Twitter earlier. His name is Slater DeBrun. Slater DeBrun has 65 grade speed, has a fringier arm, but still shows some serious contact ability and some power upside. He very much fits a profile that I think the D-backs have done very well to develop, and I would not be shocked if we hear his name called either with the 18th or 29th pick. I would also not be shocked to hear a number of different starters get brought up. One of the names I was hearing and was getting a lot of scouting looks was Chase Shores. He wasn't expected to be near the very top of the class. He's from LSU. He had some impressive stuff data, and this dude's like 6'8", so he can really like hit his spots and really just mince people apart on the mound. Those are 2 names that I feel like are guys that I would not be overtly shocked if I heard their names on draft day.
It is going to be, especially we'll have to obviously keep this, bookmark and keep this save. So then if those are 2 indeed names, you can just go and just praise that and just be like, walk into the D-backs and be like, here's this, give me a job. Come on. Like, I know it, like, come on, I know what I'm talking about here. But yeah, say Slater DeBron I liked, and then what was the name again of the pitcher? I think
it was Chase Shores. I think he's on
Chase
LSU's
Shores.
roster. He's a behemoth.
Yeah,
I saw some of his clips.
Sounding.
He's got from what I see from his clips.
God.
You see what I'm seeing?
6'8",
yeah.
250, bro.
And the thing is, when he pitches, he gets wide. So he literally looks like he's about to charge at the batter when he's about to throw and then just launches. It's scary, but I think it's a guy that fits a similar profile. He has control. The velo's not eye-popping, but it's also kind of pitcher that they like. It was someone they got in like a Daniel Egan with this past draft. It's similar to that kind of profile. He was a really fun watch, at least with Egan, and I feel like this guy mostly reminds me of Egan, just what he kind of does on the mound and just with his kind of style of how he approaches guys.
Dude, that'd be exciting. So just the height alone, I know it's maybe not the same exact height, but it definitely gave me some John Roush vibes just hearing, a 6'8" pitcher. Like that's crazy. You don't really see that too much.
So usually playing basketball.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Some people are blessed with height and they're really great at either basketball or baseball. Some people, like, my homie coworker Todd, I'm gonna put you on blast here a little bit. You're blessed with height and you were one of the most uncoordinated people on the planet. Where like I can't even toss a little foam ball at you without like, just fumbling it insanely. Literally that's what he looks like. It's insane where I'm like, man, you got the height, but you did not get the coordination when it comes to going along with the height.
There's but one more name. If you guys want a height guy, and it's another starter, it is Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is, I believe, from Oklahoma State. He is 6'9", so he is even taller. And from what I've seen with him, he has one of the lower ends of the on a velocity spectrum. He's only operating about 95, 96, which sounds like a lot, but like he's 6'9". This should be pretty easy for him to just absolutely throw a rock in there. There's some guys. There's actually a name of a similar height. He's 6'6". His name is Cruz Schoolcraft. He's a name that's also really similar to him. Cruz, if you don't know, is only like 17 going into draft day, or will be like just barely 18 going into draft day. And with that, he's throwing 96 with the least amount of effort I've seen. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so looking up, I looked up Gabe Davis. Yeah, he is a tall mofo. Like he looks like a presence on the mound that you would not want to mess with as a hitter. Like that looks pretty gross.
If he hits me with a pitch, I'll just gladly walk over to first. I'm not fighting him. I'm not.
Yeah, that's a guy where you're like, you know what, you got the reach on me. There's no point. Like, yeah, I'll just take my base and
I love how he starts his pitching motion with his glove like this. Just all you see is his eyes.
There's one pitcher that I'm trying to remember his name. There's one guy. He's on the taller. And he's one of the high school guys. When I looked at him at first, I was like, "Is that Slender Man?" Because he's only like 190 pounds, and he was something like 6'4", 6'5".
Good Lord.
He was scary to look at. It was just the most unhuman thing I've ever seen. I'm gonna see if I can find a name quickly.
Yes, take your time. We got plenty of.
I can answer a few questions while I do this part if you guys want.
Yeah, of course. So we have a few start here. I know there's a few from earlier in the show, and then obviously a few that we've gotten here kind of near the end. But the first one that we had here was from Alex Yazir in the YouTube chat asking, how come the D-backs don't scout in Mexico?
So the scouts tend to also work not necessarily in packs, but when they do get notified of guys, they usually have to see certain things come up first. I think one stereotype of scouting is that a guy is just going to randomly show up to someone's yard, see a guy throw. There's a movie about this. I'm forgetting the name, where a guy is like throwing apples at a can, and they're like, "Oh my God! Well, he threw that apple 96 miles per hour, and he becomes a pitcher or something."
Was it? In Trouble to the Curve?
I think so. I think that one. Yeah,
okay
I think that's like a really bad stereotype for like what scouts do. For the most part, they're not like going to some random jungle, crawling through, and all of a sudden finding a pitcher and they're like, "Oh my God, come back to the United States. I'll pay you $500,000. For the most part, these guys are coming from academies, or they're at least coming from very respectable institutions where they are able to actually be fully scouted out, see what they are, hopefully check their age, because yes, it still does happen. I will say as well, the D-backs have been very lucky to not have to deal with that issue, but for the most part, it's not that they don't scout in Mexico. Mexico's also not really a great country for scouting in general. Just overall, in terms of the kind of players that have come out of the country, there's not been a lot of great stuff. And that's nothing against Mexico, obviously, but it's like, I mean, what are the names I'm thinking of right now? Like Isaac Paredes?
Yeah, that makes sense. And everyone loves, I know he's not from there. I think he was born in Arizona, but like even like Alex Verdugo.
Verdugo. I mean, Alec Thomas made their national team, which nothing against Alec, but this was 2022, made their WBC team in 2023. That, I guess that kind of signals though, like a guy who was relatively mediocre at MLB level for that first season was able to make a supposedly world-class roster to face off against other countries.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But once again, nothing against Mexico, but it's just that scouting also can take you to weird spots. I forgot one of the scouts or one of the players in this draft, or not draft, signing period was from Panama, but also moved over to the Dominican Republic. So they do look elsewhere, but it's until they're like tipped off and know that a guy is there that they'll really adventure.
It makes sense that they would probably also kind of stay in the DR, especially now with like their new facility. It's one of those where like if they can really show guys there that like, hey, we're heavily invested in you guys, come sign with us instead of these other teams like the Dodgers. Even them, like they're kind of looking at different places. I believe they signed a guy out of South Sudan, if I'm pronouncing that right. And he's the first player signed out of there, which I love the clip. Obviously, again, these guys, they're very young, they're very raw, but he looked like kind of what you were mentioning earlier with one of the guys where it's like, where he's just super wild. Where I'm like, I saw him throw 4 or 5 pitches and all of them went like over the catcher. So I'm like, it's a little bit to work there, but it is interesting hearing kind of the scouting thing is a little bit of a stereotype when it comes to their over dramatization with how scouting actually works.
I mean, sometimes that does happen though. Gilbert Diaz, there's a pretty infamous story about him where he was caught in a storm and was forced to stay at the DBacks facility. They couldn't really just throw him on the street. He was a prospect at the time, but they were going to cut him. But they couldn't throw him on the street because it was nasty outside. It was a massive storm, so they had him just stay at the facility and train for a bit.
If A's had a facility in the DR, they would have cut him and thrown him outside.
But eventually, though, he was able to work around the system, develop himself, and he got a proper contract. He then moved over to the States, and now we have him at MLB level. So there's some interesting ways that things go about. I know Chris Santos literally came out of nowhere. He's from Nogales, but nobody even had him on their radar. If I have this right, I don't even think U of A was going to give him a full scholarship because that was his school that he was selected to go to.
Was he basically a walk-on?
He was not necessarily a walk-on, but he wouldn't have been one of those guys where it's like they're going to basically have free ride throughout their entire time at the U of A.
Oh, that makes sense. They're not rolling out the red carpet for him. They're gonna, give him a scholarship, but they weren't gonna basically be like, "Hey, you are our savior. Please, here, take whatever you want."
I finally found that prospect, and if you look at the image, you'll see what I mean. His name is Cameron Appenzeller. He's a lefty. He's 6'6", 180 pounds. And if you see an image of him, you'll see exactly what I thought of. If you want to just post it up for these people, he scares me. That dude is scary.
He's 6'6", 180, southpaw.
And he is tall.
Dude, yeah, he is like, I can see what you're talking about with the Slender Man, where he looks skinny, but he looks tall as hell.
He's very tall and skinny. It's very lanky.
Like, this guy's horrifying to look at. Like, imagine seeing that on the mound, or like that facing you as you're about to bat.
I imagine it's kind of like what people feel like whenever Chris Sale. I know it's not the same arm angle as Chris Sale, but that's kind of how I feel, even in MLB The Show when I had to face him.
It feels like I'm looking at Randy Johnston.
It's not as far left, but it does look a little like Sale. I feel like he's throwing from first base. Like it's just straight up. But no, this kid, wow, yeah, like this kid, he was pitching something at Chase Field. I
think the Perfect Game showcase.
Perfect Game has like a massive showcase for most of the high school guys. I know that was actually where they found Caldwell at. Caldwell was a guy that they first scouted at the showcase, and he hit a rocket down the line for a triple. And I think from that point on, they were like, "Oh my God, he's perfect for us."
Yeah, dude, I'm kind of being talked in here on Appenzeller. Just watching it, I kind of want this dude to be a D-back right now already.
He's
here. So for those that are watching on YouTube,
if you don't want to know, he's actually taller than this. He actually got taller from this point. Yeah. So he's almost the exact same weight. So this guy is tall, and he's just staring, and he's certainly interesting. I think it's a name they could go for, but they also don't tend to go for high school guys. So I would not be shocked if they don't go for a high school arm.
Yeah, it seems like they'll go for a high school outfielder, but definitely not like pitchers. It seems like whatever pitchers they draft are usually a little bit like college-esque kind of guys.
But you weren't kidding. He is the Slender Man.
Yeah, dude, he's crazy.
Yeah, this was back in August. So yeah, he's probably grown since then.
So going on into, I know you, like I said, we have a few other questions. Obviously, if you're willing to kind of like answer some of them. This other one we had was from Cam. I know you kind of going back into what we were talking about with the international draft and all that, and the potential for that, to be on the docket in the MLB in a few years. His question was kind of geared towards that. He's asking, could prospects wait until they're older to avoid the draft and just sign as a free agent if a draft was implemented?
So currently, as it is set, you have to be at minimum for international guys. I think it's either 24 or 25 in order to sign under as a international free agent, as a regular international free agent. For instance, like a Yoshinobu Yamamoto or a
Rookie.
Or well, not under as a rookie, because Roki was much smaller, or they were much younger. They had to sign under the amateur posting system, which is a bit different. So those guys, I guess a better example would actually be the Gurriel brothers. When they first came over from the United States, Yoli and Lourdes were signed under the just the international free agent one, which is much more simplistic, but it's definitely a trickier one. The two main nations that are represented by that are Mexico and Cuba, and they tend to be a bit more limited in the players that come out of them. Obviously, with Cuba having to get out of the country, and two, with Mexico, there's a certain level of competition, and you have to be above and beyond your competition like nobody else to get out of Mexico as a like a 24-year-old who hasn't seen a bit of proper high school baseball or serious like pro league time.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's definitely one of those where if they did want to obviously avoid the draft, they would have to wait not just like a few months to a few years. They'd have to wait considerable amount of time. Obviously, if this was implemented, but it wouldn't be as simple as just like not signing with the team and then just signing as a free agent.
Yeah, it would be. It's a much more lengthy process, and it's honestly a much more painful process for most of these players. And honestly, it's much easier for them to cash in immediately and get their money and start getting developed. Otherwise, you tend to run a risk that you're not the same player as you were 2-3 years ago. You don't get the money and you're screwed.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You got to cash in while you can. The next question we had here was from our, one of our OGs here, Rickety Bridge. Appreciate you. He's asking, obviously, I know you might have touched on this a little bit earlier, but kind of even like a refresher, or even if there is somebody that you didn't mention. He's asking you what your favorite, or who is your favorite pitcher in the minor league system?
If I had to choose a name just right now, there's two I'm thinking of. One's at AAA and one's in the Dominican Summer League. I guess I'll go first off with the AAA guy. It's Kyle Ament. Kyle Ament is a weird name. He was a guy that was signed out of Dallas Baptist, and he skyrocketed through the system. He showed incredible underlying metrics. I believe in high A Hillsborough, his strikeout rate was north of 40%, which, if you don't know, 30% is considered high. So from there, you can kind of look at what the pitches he throws. He throws a fastball from an extremely high slot. It is almost over his head. It looks like he's going to scratch his head almost, and he just throws it from there. He has incredible extension. He throws it with about, last I checked, about 19 inches of induced vertical break. But that is not his pitch that really sells him. He has a really sharp cutter, and he throws a screwball. So while it is listed as a curveball, that is a screwball. It is,
which is
designed
the opposite direction for the
if you watch his grip, I think he showed off the grip. It is a screwball. It is lethal. Having seen it, it is horrifying, and I would never want to face that in my life. It's one of those
dominated Hillsborough, by the way. He was disgusting. He didn't do great in Reno. It's the PCL.
No one does good in Reno.
I'll put it this way, like Reno is not a fun place. And this is also another thing. I also like to look at like how their metrics are, like their underlying and their expected numbers in Hillsborough, or not in Hillsborough, but in Reno, specifically because we get access to that, and also because of the fact that it's such a league that where really, if you hit a ball north of 90 miles per hour, anywhere close to 90 miles per hour, and in a launch angle about 30 degrees, it's gonna go.
Yeah.
if you pull it or hit it oppo, it's probably gonna go. So it's
Coursefield Jr. borderline.
Like
it's probably more cracked than Coursefield.
If you're a starter and your ERA is under 5, you're doing good.
Okay, and I'll put it this way: if it's under 4, you're considered an ace. If you want to know what Brandon fought, and it sounds somewhat unimpressive that his ERA was a 3.94, I believe it was when he was at one point in Reno. It doesn't sound that impressive. But if you don't know, if you do that in Reno, that is like beyond anything else. It
wasn't like he did it in like only like 4 or 5 starts. He did it in what, like 10 to 15 plus starts, wasn't it?
Something like that.
That's impressive.
I guess I'll parlay this into another name. I'll note another name just before I get to that, the DSL guy. It's also in AAA. His name is Kyle Backus. A name that I'm going to say. Kyle Backus, if you do not know, was a undrafted free agent. He has joined a team, and he is lanky, he is tall, and he gets a lot of extension. But velocity is not his working point. If you take Ryan Thompson and you mirror him, that is Kyle Backus. His slider had some really impressive metrics. Let me just double check and see what the numbers are. It's going to sound like a lot of jargon, but
if I remember right, Brett talked pretty highly of this guy last year during spring, if I remember right.
He was, I don't know if I was, if I had like all the, kind of information that Nugget is, but he was a guy that, it kind of made me think of a little bit of like, to Nugget's point of him being Ryan Thompson just mirrored to the other side. It instantly popped in my head. I was like, hey, we could be like what the Rays did with their bullpen, where they have all these guys with like the different arm angles to where it's, you're literally getting the whole 180 degree, like, spectrum where there's a different arm angle no matter what you're getting.
So, as of note of with Kyle Backus, he in spring training, he actually threw what I believe scanned as a 94 mile per hour changeup, which was very funny because it means that his fastballs or sinker's moving enough and it's coming from such a weird slot that StatCast breaks from it. I've seen it happen with a few guys, but it usually means that you're getting so nasty to the point that StatCast doesn't know what you're doing.
That's wild.
But in Reno for Backus, what made him very impressive to me was his slider. His sinker's pretty good, but his slider put up these numbers: a 113 expected batting average, a 200 expected slug, and a 201 xWOBA, which, if you do not know, your expected batting average should be about 250 on a pitch. If you're considering it like an average pitch, the slug should be about 350 or around that range. And your xWOBA should be about 300 if this was a average pitch with average peripherals against. That is incredibly high. And this is also at a very high elevation and a place where sliders don't actually tend to work. It's probably better than even marketed because the pitches tend to be doled out by Reno.
That's going to be a name more. I know Jeff even brought up in our comment here saying that he loves Backus. He showed in spring training last year, came in the bases loaded and struck out the side. Definitely going to be a guy that, maybe Joe Mantiply has to look on, maybe not the hot seat. I know Joe's been here for a little while, so he might have that seniority, but even if there's something else, I know the bullpen's going to be a little bit tough. A bunch of guys in there, but Backus is definitely a name that I'd be intrigued to have in there. Kind of a lefty specialist, like especially if you're staying like.
If he's going to be invited to spring training again,
I feel like he will be.
He would. I would be shocked if he's not. I would be honestly appalled if he's not, because he's a guy that I think could be up with the team extremely soon. He and Ament both profiles as guys that would be pretty immediate ads. I guess I'll also now just transition to my Dominican Summer League name. I don't expect anyone to know this. He was a guy I saw when I was just looking through Fangraphs, just messing around with the stats. Yuri Espinal. Yuri Espinal put up numbers that were ridiculously impressive for the league. We're talking about a guy that was operating at minimum 92, 93, already only at 17, and was putting up very impressive numbers for the Dominican Summer League. I could just double check his numbers quickly. Just got to get this. That.
Doing the calculation over on Fangraphs. I love it.
I gotta Gotta get to a specific page I want for my fan graph. So
There's
they are
so many
very weird.
pages on there, so I
Yeah.
don't blame you. Take your time.
So Yuri Espinal, in his lone season, had some pretty interesting rates. For one, his strikeout rate was at 35.8%, and his walk rate was under 5%. If you're like a K per nine and a base on balls per nine person, it was almost a 13 K per nine and a less than 2 base on balls per nine. His BABIP was normal, and here's the more interesting part: a 3.12 ERA, a 3.21 FIP, and a 2.43 xFIP, which is incredibly good. And it's actually one of the higher marks in all of minor league baseball with anyone under similar innings. And from what I've heard, he seems to profile like a Merrill Kelly. He has that kind of style. It is just really, really cool to see. Just like this guy ripping apart Dominican Summer League, sort of similar to what Crisantis started doing in in low A, where it's just like out of nowhere, this guy, nobody really is talking about, all of a sudden just becomes a beast. And he's a name I'm going to watch. He's going to probably grow into his frame, get a little stronger, get a little bit more velocity. And I wouldn't be shocked if eventually we start talking about him maybe 1 or 2 years down the line.
Yeah, so we'll have to, maybe, who knows, maybe like you said, next spring training, maybe he'll be like an invite, maybe we can kind of break camp. But going on to our next question that we had here, another one from Cam. This one, he was asking, which outfielder do you think will be next to make their MLB debut for us? I know the outfield is a little stacked currently. Obviously, we got, 4 outfielders out there with McCarthy, Alec, Corbin, and then Gurriel. I don't necessarily think Gurriel would opt out of his contract next year, but if he does, that would at least leave a position where, like with a bunch of these guys, like it does seem like they have a decent stockpile of outfielders out there. Who do you see being the one that would, whether it's like a big leap in the system or one that's just kind of putting up some insane numbers, whether it be AA or even at AAA at Reno, that they kind of like make their case and make their way on up to this MLB roster?
If I were to cheat, I would say Tim Tawa, but I'm not going to do that. So I would then, but I think the next name, and I think it's the name I brought up earlier, was Christian Robinson. He's expected to start in AAA this season, and knowing the kind of player he is, he's still a behemoth. That dude is big.
I forgot.
If you guys
he
have
hasn't
seen,
actually played at the major league level yet.
Yeah, he's 24 now, and obviously the light has dwindled a little. He's still put up in fall league. He put up batted balls north of 114. He still can kill a baseball. He still has elite run speeds. Also, if you ever see this dude in public, he looks like the Hulk.
He's big. He's huge.
Big. Yeah, if you guys ever see this guy, he is giant.
I think he's on the 40 man, right?
No, he's not on the 40.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised that nobody selected him. Which thank goodness, because I did not want to see a team take him.
But I also wouldn't be shocked if we see him up sooner than later. If he shows up in AAA, gets the contact rates a little better, and is still murdering a baseball, I mean, who says he couldn't just do the exact same thing in MLB? I mean, we've seen similar guys with that profile rip the ball apart.
Well, he'll definitely be at spring for sure, because they're going to want to see it. Like, I feel like they really want to see what he is. Yeah. Jeff, same thing. Talk about a guy who can make a small tweak and be an all-star. K-Rob.
K-Rob is, I know a few years, even in like pandemic in 2020, when I was kind of like buying some cards and all that of DBacks prospects, I remember I was so hyped that I got an Alec Thomas and a Christian Robinson Bowman Chrome first autos. And I was like, these guys are going to be the guys. And then, 4 years later, Alec isn't the one that we expected, at least of yet. And then obviously, some of the stuff that's been going on with K-Rob, but the fact that he's kind of still stayed, at least this kind of highly sought after or highly viewed by the D-backs and all that. I honestly, I think that's a really good poll from Nugget, that he would be one that, whether, God forbid any injuries happen, if they do, make a trade for somebody and they need to make a guy up, I think Christian Robinson would be a pretty solid case for, kind of making his way finally to the big leagues.
Only 24. That's just crazy.
I saw this one player, and I saw this question as well, where I think they asked, let me double check. There's one question I was looking at earlier, and I was very interested in. Where is it? I'm sorry.
Very good.
It's about the which prospects we could trade. I think that if they were to trade prospects, there's a few names I've been thinking of. For one, I think they would trade out of the pitching surplus. The first name I would think of, if they were to swing a big deal for a guy, let's say out of nowhere, they want like Taylor Ward, some name like that, a Jordan Westberg, a Yandy Diaz. They want to swing big. I think a name like a Yelber Diaz could be made available. Probably not Yelber, though. I think a name like Mena.
Yeah, I was like, Mena was the first one that came to my mind.
I think Mena's on the table. Obviously, Ryan is on the table despite not being a prospect. Those are guys I see them being able to trade. I think really any of the guys at the lower levels, not named Jones or Caldwell, are probably available. So Christopher Torrin, Yancel Luis, maybe Demetrio Crisantes. Those guys are still available, and those are still guys that I think the team would be willing to move in a trade for the right price.
So Jordan Westberg, to me, like I'm like, if they can swing that deal, because the amount of control that they would have with Jordan Westberg would be like, well, there's solves our third base, our future at third base situation.
Which I believe I think something I was hearing about was how Jordan Westberg would actually match up really well for a trade for someone like a Yelber Diaz or Ryan Nelson because of the years of control and the upside that they both have. But I obviously I don't expect that to happen just because I think the West or not I almost called them the Westbergs, but the Orioles have. But the Orioles have. I think they still have enough belief in Westberg that they're not gonna move him. I will say that if there are prospects to be moved, a name I was thinking of that if like a Jordan Montgomery move happened and there was a guy that could be sneakily like moved along in a Jordan Montgomery move, a guy that wouldn't affect the MLB roster to maybe make it a bit more enticing, I think Jack Hurley. There were some concerns with his whiff rates. I think that was something that the team didn't love in particular. His development's been relatively slow, and he had a really terrible back half of the season. So this is in terms of a guy, it's a sell low point and a potential for a team to try and get too tasty with it and buy high. You're like, oh, well, this guy has this kind of gradings and this style. I need to get my hands on him. I need to get this player. But at the same time, teams are usually smarter than that. But
yes, it's not often you can fleece a team like it seems like Mike Hazen does every time when he makes a trade with the Mariners.
At some point, I feel like at a certain point, and I'm about to go a little on a tangent, I feel like Mike Hazen has blackmail on people because I'm sorry. Okay, because
he does.
Look, I'm sorry. Look, I love Varsho. Does anybody even at the time think that he was worth the number 8 prospect in baseball and Lourdes Gurriel Jr.? Would you guys have done that if you not knowing what they would do afterwards? Would you have traded? I mean, hell, a year ago we had what Eugenio Suarez for Carlos Vargas, who hasn't debuted for the Mariners, and Sebi Zavala, who's been in DFA limbo for the past season. We traded away Ketel Marte for a guy, Gene Segura, who has been flip-flopping like hell since that trade. He did get him JP Crawford, but that's a different tangent. They got Mitch Haniger, who was good for a little bit, but beyond that was kind of, at least as of now, they're not exactly fond of him.
Yes, I think you got a good point. Mike Hazen must either have some dirt, or maybe he just takes these guys out to a nice like restaurant and gets them a few like nice bottles of wine in them, and then like proposes like, hey, so what if we made this trade? Just hear me out, and then the guys are just too drunk to even really like
just slips a little something in his drink.
Yeah, they're just like, all right, cool, whatever you want, man. Yeah, sure. Like I'll be buddies with you. Where he's like, don't worry, like.
At some point, I just feel like
this comment is probably so true.
That's a good point. Yeah, the teams are scared of trading with Hazen.
Trades that he's made, and they're like, DBacks have won in like, okay, you ask Blue Jays fans, and they still think that they won that trade.
Some do, some don't. I will say most are like, and because now they actually have an issue with catching. They don't love Kirk. They're not like super up on him. They lost Jansen also. And now it's like, oh, well, I really need a catching prospect. Oh, wait. And then you realize they gave it away. And
like that trade to me feels like both teams are benefiting from that trade. So I wouldn't say that it's not like the ones he makes with Seattle every freaking time.
Oh God. There's one trade I'm thinking of. He made, and I'm gonna note this, and I think I'm gonna just talk about Christian Mena for a slight second. I'm gonna note that Christian Mena has thrown, when he was at MLB level for one game, he threw a curveball clocked in at 90 miles per hour, 89.6. He threw a changeup north of 94. And do you want to know who he was given up for? A guy with an OPS, I think it was either just above or just below. It was Dominic Fletcher. And yes, we love Fletcher. If you can go and just look at his stats quickly, you will see quickly how bad this already looks. I don't know who he gets.
So he was
the amount of trades that he just has hit, pun intended, out of the park is like he's so good at it. And like there's a lot of GMs, executives that are either good at trades, good at signing free agents, drafting. Like I feel like Hazen is solid at all of it. Like I wouldn't say he's the best at them, but he's not like it's not like it's a major weakness. Like he definitely, and the fact that he just got a huge scout from the Red Sox. Like I think
that guy.
I think that's something that most fans are gonna be like, okay, whatever. We're gonna see probably the outcome of that over the next couple of years.
So I'm actually going to note something on that guy. The name you mentioned was the guy who actually was the lead scouting director behind getting Mookie Betts. He was the guy who, over the past 20 years, has been what has made the Red Sox farm system what it is. And I will also note that he's basically the guy who scouted out Christian Campbell and Roman Anthony, two guys that are currently the top of the Red Sox system and are in the top of MLB's top 100. These are like top end guys. He will find players anywhere. I could not even begin to tell you the kind of guys that this guy could probably pull. There's a good chance that you'll probably pick up your next door neighbor and turn him into a starter that throws 98. At this stage, like I've seen him do this to other players too. Because some of the guys he picked up, Roman Anthony was not even in a top 20 of some draft boards, like in a top 20 like rounds. He was expected to be an undrafted, and he still got him. So
I saw, I don't remember who it was, but they're like redo the 2022 whatever year was Drew Jones and Jackson Holiday. And they redid it, and the first overall pick was Roman Anthony, and then Jackson Holiday.
Yeah, Roman Anthony had some pretty impressive batted ball metrics, and this was a guy who still was like a solid defender too. He wasn't like a complete chump out in the field. He wasn't blinded, but he had batted ball metrics, which I can just quickly just load up just because I want to double check and make sure I'm not talking out of thin air. Let me see if I can get Roman Anthony up here.
No, so real quick, Jeff brings up Ketel Marte with the Mariners. He made it 30 days, actually not even 30 days after he got hired October 16th of 2016, and the Ketel trade was November 23rd. So just over a month. I still think that's the best trade that he's ever made.
Okay.
And this is mostly a joke. And this is mostly a joke, but I'm very convinced that the scout for the Red Sox, all he had to do was see that Mookie Betts' initials were MLB, and he's like, "Yep, that's all I need to see."
I think I can. I think I just sent it to Brett quickly. This was a specific thing I would note on Anthony. This is who he scouted out and this is what he put up in AAA. This is the kind of guy that was like he's able to get and turn out of nothing.
Here, let me send this to Brandon if I can.
This is like this is in terms of wins this offseason. I honestly might put this on par with the Burns signing. It's really that kind of thing where we won't realize the fruits of the labor until probably 4, 5, 6 years down the line. And then we'll see a guy come up and we'll be like, oh my God, how did we get this guy in round number 3 or round number 4?
Yeah, so he's got some crazy numbers. Roman Anthony does.
Yeah. If you do not know Roman Anthony, he's consensus top 10 guy in baseball right now in terms of the prospects. The Red Sox have one of the best farm systems in baseball right now. They actually were able to trade for what was it? They got Crochet and they did not give up a single one of their top 5, I believe it was. So that just sort of shows you what he's been able to build. He's helped to scout out players like Jackie Bradley Jr., Mookie Betts, among others. Pretty much every Red Sox pitcher that you could think of on the American side is scouted by him.
Here.
This guy puts up.
Look at this, you guys. This is beautiful.
Okay. This is by Thomas DeStico on Twitter. Shout out to him. But if you don't know this, basically just know red means good, and that is a lot of red.
Yeah, a lot of dark red, and like you said, red. It's almost like if we went caveman brain, red unga bunga, red make me unga bunga, and those are a lot of dark red numbers right there from Roman Anthony.
Yeah.
Anthony is, but I guess to get off of Roman Anthony here, I do think that the farm system, and just sort of to wrap it up, I do think the farm system's in a very good state. I think that there's definitely places to add. I think that on the younger end of pitching, it's a little bit more limited. There's not a lot of pitching in terms of the low and high A levels of the system in terms of starters and relievers. But I think that the system still is quite good. They have a lot of young pitching talent in your MLB level. I really do think that they're in a good state, especially with the outfielders. They're plentiful on position players. They still can really develop some guys. And I think that if guys could stay healthy, because I think with 16 players of their top 30 were injured or were playing through injury last season, they were able to produce still. So hopefully more stay healthy this year and more can really come up and be impressive.
Yes, it's definitely, even I believe Jeff brought it up earlier, if we can get some, if K-Rob, Drew Jones, Melendez bounce back, then we can definitely see this farm being maybe not what it was projected, obviously, in like 21, 22, when we had guys like Corbin and all that in there. Could definitely look back and, maybe see this farm rise a little bit in some of the rankings. I know some of the rankings don't really matter, but still it's one of those where I think this is just, in general, just a good move overall, and we'll see some of the fruits of their labor hopefully in the next few years at the most.
And I guess also to finish off, I'll just name off a few players you could see an MLB level just really quickly. One name, and actually two. Both of these guys were in AA. Caleb Roberts and AJ Vukovic. Both of them will probably be more utility guys, but they both could profile into MLB roles. Austin Pope was a name I've heard a bit of. He has a pretty interesting fastball and a really good cutter. He had some problems with walks, but he also has the kind of stuff that makes you think of like a Kevin Ginkel type. He sort of fits into that kind of style in terms of what he throws. To sort of swap out the cutter for a slider and maybe throw in like a changeup from time to time, and that's what you're going to get with Pope.
Yes, Pope's been a name that I've heard a little bit about, and honestly, he got some pretty exciting stuff. So we'll hopefully see him, kind of make a rise, like you said. But again, we appreciate you stopping by here, Riley, aka Nugget. Again, if you guys aren't in the Discord as well, make sure you guys click the link in the Discord, or click the Discord link in the description. Man, after streaming for my work and then streaming here, my brain is fried today. But make sure you guys click the link in the description, join on in. So if you guys have any other, prospect questions or anything like that, that our man Nugget can answer in there, that is the place to be. Again, follow us on Twitter as well. Check out the also on Blue Sky. I keep forgetting about that being an app. Follow us on Blue Sky.
So do I, because I forget to post from it.
I think we're on TikTok too. We got some bangers on TikTok. Gabe's got some banger ideas in there. I know that's going to be hopefully up for a little while. And then again, check out all the other stuff on azsnakepit.com. Bunch of great articles, not just from our man Jeff here in the comments. He's a writer on there as well, but a bunch of, just other diehard D-backs fans and other, things in there. That's some great content. But yeah, like Jeff's saying, again, seriously, Riley, thank you very much for giving us your time here to stop by. Kind of enlighten us a little bit on not only the international player signing process and kind of some of the names that we did sign in that period, but also kind of giving us a little bit of a deeper look in the minor league system, some guys that, we could keep an eye out on, maybe some guys that aren't as known of, like Kyle Ament is a name that I personally am definitely going to be looking out on, and especially even some guys that they could potentially, aim for in the drafts, kind of like the tall Slenderman. So any final things before we get out of here?
Nothing too much. I just want to say that it was a joy to really be brought on here. I really do hope, though, that like as fans, we can just sort of understand that, sometimes this stuff does take time, though, because honestly, and I will say this about the farm, well, there's a lot of upside. It takes some time. There are some players here that will look out 5 years from now and they'll barely be moved. There'll be guys in 5 years from now, guys will just be barely in AA yet. So just as a bit of a warning with prospects, and I guess as a note, it takes time, but at certain points you'll see guys fly through the system. And more than anything, if you really do want to look into their systems, look into any team that you'd like to look into and see what they have. It's a whole new world of baseball. It's basically 7 different levels combined, and you can just look through all of them and find so many new and interesting players.
Yeah, so that's definitely going to be something that I know I myself can be better about, being a little bit more patient with guys, and then obviously just kind of looking at stuff. But what is not going to be a long process is having to wait for a pitchers and catchers report, because we are not too far from that. So again, we appreciate each and every single one of you guys for tuning in here at D-backs Dispatch. Again, shout out our man Nugget. Go follow him as well on socials as well. I know Nugget, I think you said that was your name on there as well as Discord. So
yeah, I can just send out my Twitter link here.
Send it in the chat. Make sure you guys go show him some love, and kind of like be in tune, because like I said, not only in the Discord, I know he's posting a lot of the information in there, so join that, but also just show him some love and drop him a follow on Twitter, because again, we really appreciate him coming by, spending this hour plus with us. I know it's a longer show than you guys are probably normally used to, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to prospects and all that. So let me wait for it to get in here so we don't just end before it goes out here.
Yeah, I can try and get it together.
He may not be able to add it in chat, so if you just want to send it to me, I'll make sure it's in the description of the video.
Good idea. Check the description for all that.
Yeah, that should be good.
Heck yeah. Well, again, we appreciate each and every one of you guys for coming along with us. If we have any crazy trade news or anything like that, you can guys expect us to have an emergency pod. But in the meantime, we will see you guys on the next episode here of D-backs Dispatch.
It's the D-backs Dispatch. Let's go. Yeah. Bring the red game, Josh on the floor. West Coast vibes, catch us on the air. Home running dogs, diamond gems, we share. Brandon was a stat, Caesar man was a plan. Red races down, Chelsea like it is, man. Gabs on fire, brings the heat every time. Josh on the mix, keep the beat so prime. I got that insight, 7 weeks ahead. Tune in, D-backs Dispatch, this is it. Now we rollin'. D-backs Dispatch, yeah. Talk to Brandon, Brady, Gabe, this is Big Cash. Josh on the mix, he makes the beats. West Coast vibe, got the G fucking the bad. The home Mac, the home Mac, the home Mac, home Mac. D-backs Dispatch, we here to stay. Yeah, catch us every week, we bring the play-by tour. We got the home Mac, the home Mac, the home Mac, home Mac. D-backs Dispatch, we here to stay. Catch us every week, we bring the play-by tour.